Hello everybody, this is Robert from the Church of the Basement Dragon Facebook page, named after the late, great Carl Sagan in his Dragon Riddle, although he put the dragon in his garage if I recall. But since I don't have a garage, I moved his dragon into my basement, and you cannot prove that I did not do this. So, anyway, today we're going to be talking a little bit about abiogenesis. Abiogenesis is, quite simply, life from non-life. Now, I've had discussions with creationists, theists, usually Christians, a couple of Muslims, and what else for some reason, on this particular topic. Now, the thing about abiogenesis is they often get confused, well, they, being the theists in question, often get confused between abiogenesis and, what was it called? Spontaneous generation. Spontaneous generation held that things just kind of popped into existence. It was falsified by Louis Pasteur a very long time ago. Don't recall the year. Look it up if you care. But one of the things that Christians often make a mistake about is that Louis Pasteur did not falsify abiogenesis. He couldn't have, because abiogenesis did not exist as a hypothesis in his day. He was dead by the time somebody came up with it. It was a Russian fellow, I don't recall his name offhand, but he came up with it, I want to say, in 1927. Now, the concept of abiogenesis essentially deals not with things popping into existence, but with a process of chemical assembly. Chemical assembly is not new. It's not a hypothesis. We rely on chemical assembly all the time. It is simply undirected and the result of purely natural processes. If you've ever worked in a kitchen, you know what chemical assembly is. You do it all the time, every time you cook. You put a series of chemicals that we call food or ingredients together under certain conditions, such as cooking, and wait for the chemicals to change to a degree and make something new, something delicious, hopefully. Unless I cooked it, in which case it's going to be terrible, or at least ugly. Now, that's an oversimplification, of course, but chemical assembly is not unknown. But what is a chemical? A chemical is nothing more than a combination of two or more elements. Now, the Christian apologists will usually ask the question, well, where did the elements come from? I'll go into that on a different day. For now, suffice to say that they exist. And chemicals can combine together under a variety of different circumstances. All they really require is energy. We see protocells. Oh, hold on, I see a comment here. Chemical assembly can be linked to divine design. Well, no, not really. It can be asserted that that is the case, but it cannot be demonstrated in any factual sense. Doesn't mean that it's not true, but if you can't show it, you don't know it. Now, anyway, where was I? Oh yes, it's enough to say that chemicals can assemble independently. All they require is an energy source. We see protocells behaving dynamically in all kinds of ways. When people think of chemicals, they usually think of chemicals in terms of things that are just inert, inactive, dead. For example, down here, you can see any number of rocks. Rocks are made up of just combinations of chemicals. Dirt, water, everything that you're seeing around me, and the things that you're not, is made up of chemicals that came together under various conditions to form larger objects, which are nothing more than complex chemical chains. And that's all life is, a lot of complex chemical chains. Now, I'm not saying that DNA could just assemble by default. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm not even saying that about RNA. But what I am saying is that there is a process by which it can occur. It might take a long time. The earliest evidence of life that we have goes back about 3.5 billion years. And we have good reason, evidence-based reason, I should say, to think that life was around a little bit before that. A little bit in geologic time, not in terms of our normal calendar. Now, if you start off with simple elements, subject them to an energy-based process, heat from the sun, motion from the waves, heat from hydrothermal vents, you'll get a chemical. Now, if you have a continuous cycling of energy from a source, you can have chemicals that these new chemicals combine together to form longer, more complex chemical chains. And as long, wow, this got deep. I'm glad I didn't wade further out into that. That would get cold really fast. Anyway, now, where was I? If you have these simple chemicals subjected to a constant process of energy input, you can get these chemicals to combine with other chemicals. You go from simple chemicals, what these are, to complex chemicals. You can combine two or more complex chemicals, slippery here, into even more complex chemicals. You can end up with, eventually, nucleotides. The key here, of course, is to get to one simple, well, important, anyway, stage. And that stage is self-replication. If you can get to self-replication, then you can get it to the point where you no longer need the chemical assembly process the way you once did. Modern experiments in abiogenesis, such as the Urey Miller experiment, showed that with an energy input and a bunch of chemicals put together, you could get complex amino acid chains. More recent research, which have replicated the activities of hydrothermal vents, have shown much the same, that you can get this in a variety of conditions. And over hundreds of millions of years, with these chemicals constantly cycling, assembling, combining together to make more complex chains, eventually you get a self-replicating, whoa, hold on, I'm sinking here. Eventually you get self-replicating material. And once you have self-replicating material, which is to say, in this case, RNA, which is the prevalent hypothesis at the moment, you get evolution in action. All you really need is a continuous process of selection for favorable replication. And RNA is favorable to replication, and DNA is even more favorable. And none of these are more than simply chemicals. Combinations of chemical chains that do certain things. It's not magic. It's not mysticism. Now, I will add with a caveat, this is not even a theory yet. Theory is the pinnacle of scientific achievement, not law. Law is simply a description-based observation. I throw this rock up in the air here. It will fall down. I mean, that's an observation. That's basically a law of gravity. On the other hand, you have gravitational theory. Laws and theories are different things. You don't move up from one to another. Theory is actually the pinnacle of scientific achievement. And it takes a long way to get to theory. So with that understood, abiogenesis is still a hypothesis. However, many of the steps in abiogenesis have been observed. They haven't gotten to the final point yet, but the evidence that it can be done is substantial and growing. Now, some may say it's premature to accept it. All right, I can accept that. However, if abiogenesis is a long way off from being accepted as a scientific theory, then the God hypothesis has not even left the drawing board yet. I've just been told that life looks much like the rest of the universe. Well, I don't know about that. When we're talking about life, we're talking about biological activity. We haven't seen that anywhere else in the universe. We've seen a lot of dead zones, destruction, beautiful things in their own way, but certainly nothing like what we might call lifelike conditions. Latest estimates on the size of the universe puts it at 2 trillion galaxies. That's a massive increase from where it was. I mean, it used to be only in the billions, which is saying something that I have to use the word only in that context. But 2 trillion galaxies, each of which may have hundreds of billions of solar systems, each of which may have an indeterminate number of planets. Kind of diminishes our place in the universe a little bit if it weren't for the fact that we're here and we can appreciate this planet for what it does for us and what it is for us. Now, I'm just going to go quiet for a minute and let you enjoy what I happen to see, because this is going to be rough terrain for me for a moment. It really is beautiful out here. I've spotted a couple of tires, oddly enough. I guess that shouldn't be odd, but well, let's just call it unfortunate. Not a fan of pollution. Or littering, I guess would be the better word here. Certainly does pollute my vision, though. Now, actually, that is sort of relevant. We talk about abiogenesis and the appearance of design in life versus non-life. Forget what his name was. Someone named Paley. William Paley, I think his name was. Theologian who posed the watchmaker analogy. He said, if I go along and find a watch, I know that somebody put this together. It seemed like a pretty good argument at the time, but like most arguments of that nature, it's not really as good as it looks. For example, that log over there, was it designed or not designed? Compare it to these shoes. Were these designed or not designed? Now, shoes don't grow anywhere. Shoes are manufactured. They do not occur in nature. And that's really how we typically recognize design, is whether or not something occurs in nature. You contrast what you know to be manufactured by human hands with things that do not occur except in nature, such as all these leaves, which are crunching under feet. Now, people are often impressed by the complexity of things. The complexity does not necessarily indicate design. In fact, if anything, simplicity indicates design, because the more complex you make it, the more easily you can break it. That's why designers try to make things as simple as possible. Life, by contrast, has a lot of absurdities to it. Let's see, what else is anybody saying here? When we talk about divine design, well, what does divine design look like? And if nature is divine design, as one commentator has suggested, well, what does not design look like? See, that's one of the problems with that particular worldview. Look around here. what around me was not designed. And if you insist everything is designed, what are you contrasting it with? What would something that's undesigned look like? It's kind of the problem with that worldview. It gives you nothing to contrast it with because it's left the person making the assertion stuck in a bind where literally everything, including all of these individual little rocks that seem to serve no apparent purpose, are designed deliberately with intent. Now, it has been asserted that molecular structure replicates the universe. Well, I'm not really sure what that means. I don't really see how that's the case. Does molecular structure have black holes? Do things collapse in on them? Do stars or molecules collapse in on themselves due to the intense pressure of gravitational force to the point where it forces a star into being? I'm not really sure where this analogy is going. Oh, man. Look at this. It would have been really something to be here when some of these things toppled over. It's hard to believe I'm on a military base occupied by thousands of people. It really is. It feels like I'm the only one in the world, except, of course, for my audience here. I wish you guys could be here with me. If you ever get to Louisville, let me know, and I will take you on a hike somewhere great. I know all the best spots. I think this has been sufficient for now. I hope I've covered the topic, at least on the surface level, to your satisfaction. Now, this is Robert from the Church of the Basement Dragon and the YouTube channel the YouTube channel Reasonable Doubt, and I wish you well.